Thank you all for stopping back by. You know what I'll talk about today? I'll get right into it without going through all of that intro stuff and all that stuff that I go through every week. But I want to talk about kind of sort of a blast from the past. I want to talk about Lolo Jones. And there's a reason, obviously, there's a reason I want to talk about Lolo Jones. But for people that don't know, hold on a second. For people that don't know, she was an Olympian. For people that don't know Lolo Jones, she was an Olympian, and well, let me backtrack because I was told that once you are an Olympian, regardless of what you did in the Olympics, you're always considered an Olympian. So I shouldn't say that she was an Olympian. She is an Olympian. That was her claim to fame. She is. They also say it about Marines. Now that I'm thinking about it, once a Marine, always a Marine, even if you're retired. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But she was famous because she was a world class hurdler. She won all of these gold medals leading up to the Olympics. She was the favorite in the Olympics the first time that she went, and she wound up tripping on the hurdle when she was in the lead. And she became this like sympathetic figure because things didn't work out for her. She went back to the Olympics, I think, after that and failed even more miserably. So she never won a medal, but she was known for that and the fact that she's quite attractive. But then she transitioned to the Olympic bobsled and the Winter Olympics and competed in the bobsled. So then she was known for that. I don't think she medaled in that either. And the reason that I say I think is because I guess I could have went and looked it up before this podcast. But since this episode has absolutely nothing to do with her athletic accomplishments, I don't really care if she medaled or not. But I think it's a safe bet to say that she didn't. Anyway, like I said, that's not what we're here to talk about. That's just to give you a little context for who she is. And for those people that already know who she is, I'm sure that they won't be surprised to know that she was also famous for being known as a virgin. Well, she was a virgin back then, and now she's 38 and she's still a virgin. And as a matter of fact, for people that do know her, they know that her virginity, I wouldn't say she was known for her virginity as much as her athletic accomplishments, but to some people, especially men who found her attractive, I'm sure that they would say it's neck and neck. If not, they didn't know her for the virginity thing more so than the virgin thing. So that's that. But the reason that I'm bringing her up is because I read an article, and as you found out by now, most of these conversations or these episodes start with me either reading an article, having a personal experience, or talking to a friend about their personal experiences. And in this case, I read an article about her, and in the article, the thing that really resonated with me was that she talked about losing hope that she'll ever find love. And unfortunately, that's something that way too many of us, including myself, either is wrestling with or has wrestled with. And I will say this though, boy, if she's 38 and she's wrestling with the whole idea of never finding love, boy, just wait until you're 50. That's all I'll say about that. Boy, just wait. Then talk to me, sister, about the whole hope and lack of hope and all of that and finding love. Anyway, but anyway, and while we all have different reasons, those of us who are kind of in a position where we kind of wonder if love is ever going to find us or if we're ever going to find love, we all have different reasons for the way that we feel that she does. But in her case, she believes that her virginity is, if not the reason, is one of the primary reasons that she's single. And she points to the fact that she goes out on dates, and when she tells the guys that she's a virgin or whatever and she gets that out of the way quickly, she says that the relationships fizzle from there. I guess the contention that I would make would be that, well, maybe those weren't the types of guys that you wanted to be with in the first place. If the only reason that they're bailing without even giving it a shot is because they find out that you're not going to sleep with them, as quickly as they would like, that doesn't necessarily sound like that is the person that you need to be with anyway. Who knows? But the other thing that was interesting about that was that she openly questioned why God hasn't sent someone to her yet. And considering, and she especially asked that question considering that the way that she sees it, she's making this sacrifice because of her faith in devotion to him. So she questions why she hasn't been rewarded with, in this case, a husband. And that really got me thinking. The first thought in all of that is I'm amazed at how people that believe in God and Christianity don't necessarily want to abide by the whole sex before marriage thing. And not in her case, just talking about people in general. And the reason that I bring up Christianity is not to single out Christians or Christianity. This is not one of those episodes where I'm bashing religion. That is definitely not the case. The reason I bring it up in this case is because two things. One, she's a professed Christian and follows the Christian faith. And the second thing is that I know for a fact that Christianity speaks about the perils of sex before marriage. But just as an aside, going back to that point, it's funny to me how many people I talk to, male and female, who laugh at the whole idea of waiting until marriage before they have sex. And it's funny because men used to be like, nah, I'm not feeling that at all. But definitely funny that as I get older, there are more and more women who are like, nah, forget that. I'm not waiting for that. As a matter of fact, it's funny because women, not only are they not waiting for sex, I know more and more women who aren't waiting at all. It's like, shoot, it's like they want it as quickly as possible too. The only difference between a man wanting it as soon as possible and a woman wanting it as soon as possible is that the woman will be like, well, the guy just be like, I'll take it whenever. But the woman will be like, okay, I want to do this. I want to have sex with this dude. I just want, I just need him to be sane, to show that he's sane at least for a minute. So it's basically like, I'm going to sleep with you. Just don't fuck it up. Please don't fuck it up. Don't fuck it up. And that cracks me up because I've had several women say that. It's like, especially women as they get older. It's like back in the day, women in their 20s and 30s or whatever, they would talk about like, well, I'm giving you sex. It's like you would ask, like, okay, I'm doing this for you. What are you doing for me? Well, I'm sleeping with you, and that was the prize. Women in this day and age, they're not even coming with that. Women are openly admitting to their credit. Now it's like, yeah, I cannot say that I'm having sex with you for the benefit of you. It's like that might have worked back in the day, but nah, I want it because I want it. And hey, if you facilitate, that's great. But again, you have to act like you're sane, at least show that you're sane for the least bit. And it's amazing how you appreciate the fact that people are their true, genuine selves. But man, oh man, I tell you what, just finding somebody who can act like they have some sense for just a minute and a half seems to be harder and harder to find. So, hey, ladies, I understand. I feel your pain, and I can act sane for a minute and a half, at least. But anyway, going back to the whole thing about holding out until marriage, it's like I think back to a previous episode of this podcast, and we're in season 2 now. But I encourage anybody who's new to this show to go back and listen to some of the episodes, for better or worse, just to hear what some of the topics were. But in one of the episodes, me and Reggie were discussing sex before marriage, and I actually said to him that I can actually see myself holding out until marriage. It was something that I necessarily couldn't have thought of then, but now as I think about it, I think I actually could. And Reggie responded to that by cursing me out basically and saying that I was ridiculous. And that's what most people seem to agree with his side and not my side, because not there aren't many people who are willing to wait in this day and age. So, but with that said, this isn't about judging anyone for holding out, for making a choice to hold out, like Lolo Jones, or for anyone who's declaring vehemently that they will not hold out, for those that are refusing to hold out. Hey, I am not here to judge that stuff. Whatever works for you. But people that refuse to wait, they point to wanting to know what they're getting into, literally, pause, before making a lifelong commitment. And that makes sense to me, especially when it comes to women. Now, because with women, there are like physical barriers that you have to cross. And I am not mad at a woman for wanting to know, okay, at the least, is this dude big enough to satisfy me? That is fair, because it would really suck to take vows with someone, make a lifelong commitment with someone, only to find out that, boy, they didn't have what it took to get the job done. And then you're stuck with them for like 20, 30, 40, 50 years or whatever. And I would imagine, though, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, if you were with if you were with someone, let's say you dated somebody for 6 months and then you proposed, and even though you didn't have sex or anything like that, and now there's like a debate that seems to be going on between what constitutes sex as it pertains to one's faith. Does that include oral sex? Does that include hand jobs? Does that include even masturbation in some cases? So even if you went through that time and you didn't even feel the dude's dick, which seems to be strange, you would think you could even at least feel it like in a hug or something. I would imagine that you would have some kind of physical contact, even with clothes on. Anyway, but if it didn't happen and you found out on wedding night that this dude would never be able to please you, ooh, that would suck. That would suck. I remember I have a friend, and she was telling me the story about this dude that she dated for a little bit because he was really cool in every other way. But she said that his dick was the size of a thumb. And as I hold up my thumb, when I held it up, she was like, yeah, that big, which was startling to me. And she was like, when they actually attempted to have sex, they tried to do doggy style because that gives you the most penetration. And she said that it felt the same way that it would have if they'd had clothes on. And she said that he was like trying to go extra hard and stuff like that. Like he was like really putting in work. And I was like, well, shoot, did you know that did did he know that he wasn't that dude? Did And she was like, well, the way that he was acting during the act, he was acting like he was that dude. And I was like, did you tell him? And she was like, how do you tell somebody that? And I was like, I don't really know. And so I was like, okay. Her comeback also was, well, why didn't he should have known? And I was like, well, I guess in theory, I guess, but if he's been with other women and no other women have told him about himself, I mean, guys, we not like actively looking at other dudes' dicks to and comparing sizes. So if you're not looking at dicks and stuff like that, I don't know how he would know, especially if, and I asked her, like, were you faking the funk? Were you like acting like he was putting it down? Were you like moaning and stuff like that? And she was like, well, she was like, kind of, sort of, and all of this. And I was like, see, that's, it's like, I want to say it's her fault, but I really can't honestly say it's her fault because that is something hard to tell a person. And even when they broke up, she said that she didn't tell him that that was the reason and that was the only reason. But she made up some kind of excuse. I don't even remember what the excuse was, but it wasn't the truth, which was his dick was small, basically. So it was like, okay, you're part of the reason that he felt like he was putting in work. But then she came back with the counter to kind of shut it down. She was like, okay, what is the purpose in my telling him that if there's nothing that he can do about it? Now, I don't know a whole lot or anything about implants and stuff like that, but from what I hear in general, they don't work. So if you are coming up short in that area, I don't really know what you can do except do other things. I don't know. I don't know. She had a point, and I didn't really have a comeback for that. And so I'm sorry I went off on that aside, but that was her justification, and that's a lot of women's justification. And that justification does make sense, even though it seems like you could look at this stuff like I'd be like, yo, give me a peek before we get married. Give me a peek as opposed to walking down the aisle and then finding out the hard way. Pause on that one too. Anyway, that's a women's concern, and that's understandable to a certain extent. Men's concerns, men say the same thing. They want to know what they're getting into before they get married, but it's a little bit different when it comes to men. It's like, and honestly, the only thing that we'll know is how enjoyable it is to be with that woman when we're having sex at that time and getting it out of the way. That won't necessarily mean that things will always be that way when we get married. That won't be an indicator necessarily of how things will be when we get married, which is what I just said. Just use different words anyway. Because in all honesty, like having sex before marriage really doesn't benefit us from a man. We say it does, and we do have some insight, but we just honestly just want to have sex just because we want to have sex as soon as possible, marriage or not. It's just what we do. So we say the same things, but when women say it has a little bit more validity, man, we just trying to get over, but it is better to know. And part of the thing about the reason that I say that you can't really tell like how a woman's going to be once they get married is because I hear men, married men, all the time talk about how women can be great in bed. And then once they get married, things just like change in an instant. And like I said, I hear that all of the time. It's so weird. And I still, me and Reggie talked about this too in the past episode, and I still can't wrap my mind around it because it's like, okay, women talk about men, and I'm talking about the demographic of this podcast. Women in this age group, they talk about men not being as sexual as they would like them to be. But then conversely, you talk to men who say that once they get married, women aren't as sexual as they would like them to be. So somebody I don't really understand how to wrap my mind around that, to be honest. I don't really know what to make of it because and I've heard that from like way too many men. And I just don't really know what happens after marriage. And I understand that, once you get married, you have kids and the kids like drain you and all of this stuff and other stresses and stuff like that, kind of suck the time away that could be used having sex. But this leads me to another thing that I was thinking when I was preparing for this. It's like, why do people stop having sex, married or not, especially if it was good in the beginning? It's like, I can't really think of something that I enjoy as much as sex. Then all of a sudden, or even over the course of time, I stop enjoying it. That just that just doesn't make any sense to me. And and while I understand again the whole thing about things change, kids and all of that stuff, and even when you talk about women being premenopausal, perimenopausal, going through menopause, hormonal shifts, things like that, to me, what it still comes down to is if you enjoy something, why would you not want to do as much of it as possible? And and in some ways, I kind of thought of it like maybe it's like a kid. when they're growing up, they're getting to all kinds of things and they're all into this and that or whatever for the moment. And then after a while, they just completely lose interest in it. But then I kind of like dismissed that because I was like, okay, that's different because when we talk about sex, we're talking about something that actually feels good. It feels physically good. And I don't know anything that feels good that people would want to do less of. Anything. It's like if you get a massage, like a platonic massage. I never heard anyone say, I used to love massages, but now I don't like them anymore. It's like, and so that's kind of how I feel about sex. That's the thing that I can't wrap my mind around it. It's like, does it stop feeling good? And if it still feels good, why would you want to do less of it? Now, you might say, well, I don't want to put in all that work that I used to put in. I'm not capable of putting in all that work that I used to put in. But still, you can do other things to achieve that feeling without putting in the same amount of work. I don't know. I don't know. This is something that I don't understand, but obviously it's something that I think about and I've thought about openly. And as someone who still wants to get married, but who's also someone who's older in age, I don't want to get married and then 5 years from now being like, well, me and my wife, we only have sex once a month. Nah, that wouldn't work. Or or maybe they just lose interest in sex and having sex in general. And maybe no, they don't lose interest in having sex. Maybe they lose interest in having sex with you. Yeah. Maybe they lose interest in having sex with their spouse. And this is one of those cases where I wish we could do like live experiments because I wish that if you gave somebody an unlimited hall pass and they had access to sleep with anyone, this is male or female, uh, particularly in females' cases, because most men, they'll admit that they're just tired of sleeping with their spouses. But in a woman's case, I wonder, like, if they had access to Idris Elba and could sleep with Idris Elba, would they do it in the midst of their declaring that I just don't like sex anymore? Sex is just so much work. Sex is a drag. I wonder if they sleep with that dude or whatever dude floats their boat. But we can't have those experiments. So, I guess we'll never really know, you know. Or I remember Reggie used to always like come to a conclusion and then say, well, if you're being honest about it, as if people were lying to him. But that's a whole nother issue. And that was funny. But anyway, going back to the whole thing about waiting for sex, it just seems to me that dating without sex, like, would really like allow couples to get to the heart of the matter sooner, and then they would find out where they stand with each other quicker without the whole cloud of sex just like hanging over their head or whatever. At least that's what I would think. And when I talk to people about it, it's like the same thing that people say when I bring up the whole thing about, okay, what about the sex before marriage thing? And how does that conflict with your religion? They say, yeah, you're right. But, and when I bring up the point about, you know, this cloud of sex hovering things and things would be simpler and easier to get to the root of whether you like this person or not if you didn't have sex, I get the same answer. It's like, yeah, you're right. But, and so that's another one of those things where, yeah, you know what's right, but still you want to do what's more convenient because as we as we all know, we're talking about taking sex off the table. It can make us irrational, especially if it's done the right way. If it's good to us, boy, we can start thinking and doing things that we never really thought of it and we never really thought of. And like I said, even though people agree with me, they're still not willing to forego it, you know. And part of the reason that people aren't willing to forego sex is because that mess is not easy. It's like you're with somebody that you're obviously sexually attracted to. If you weren't sexually attracted to them, then you wouldn't be dating them in the first place. At least I don't know anybody that dates someone that they're not sexually attracted to. And even if they do find themselves in that situation where they'll give somebody a chance, they're giving somebody that chance with the hope that sexual attraction can grow because of all of the other qualities that they see as positive. So, the point I'm making is that sexual attraction is always something that's hovering in the wings or whatever. And with that being said, if you're sexually attracted to someone, it's hard to just be like, I, we are attracted to each other. With being attracted to someone, there's obvious physical contact, even if it's hugging, even if it's kissing, which can lead to other feelings. So nobody just wants to go through that. Nobody wants to do the hard work, and that's the point. And as for me, like I said, as I get older, I don't know that I've ruled the whole idea of taking sex off the table. Or if I met someone, I can't see myself initiating it. But if I met someone who was like, I want to wait until marriage, while I could see myself waiting, shoot, I would need some guarantees. It'll be like, I need to know that if I wait, I need to know that we're going to have sex this amount of times, this often, or whatever. I don't care how it looks, how it sounds. That's what I'm thinking. And that's what I would need. Put it in writing, whatever you want to do, because if we hold off on sex for 6 months to a year, however long it takes to get married, shoot, that right there is grounds for divorce. I am not sticking around in a sexless marriage. I don't care what other qualities you have. That's a problem. And it reminds me, on a side note, and this could be a rumor or whatever, but I remember hearing back in the day when Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck, when they were married the first not married, when they were engaged the first time. Now they're dating again. They're not engaged or whatever, but now, yeah, they're dating again. And that's something that would make for a topic that I think I'll cover, like going back to the old thing and how that works out. Boy, it hadn't worked out for me. But, and trust me, I've tried it. But with that said, going back to Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck, the rumor was that they had a prenup, and in the prenup, Jennifer Lopez was the one that added a sex clause to the prenup. And according to this rumor, it mandated that they had sex at least 4 times a week, 4 days a week, or something like that. So shout out to Jennifer. If that's true, if it's not true, it is what it is. Either way, I don't think it's a bad idea. As a matter of fact, I think it's a great idea, and it's something that I would be looking for if a woman made me wait to marriage. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let me close out. And the point in all of this, as we went around the world about holding out for sex versus having sex, is that the thing about Lolo that resonated with me, I think I mentioned that before, but the thing that resonated with me, one of the things that resonated with me was that I really felt bad for her. I felt bad for her, one, because she's losing hope for love. And again, like I said, just wait till you're 50 and then talk to me about hope. But that's the first thing. It just sucks that, we all were built to be with somebody. None of us were built to be alone. I mean, we were built to sustain while being alone, but I don't think we were built to be alone. Two totally different things. So it sucks that she's lost hope. So that was the one thing that made me feel bad. The second thing is that she's never had the pleasure of experiencing what people around the world pay for, harm people for, commit crimes for, act like totally different people for, act like suckers for, get played for. She's never had that experience, assuming that she's telling the truth, of course. Which I wish I'll give her the benefit of the doubt on that. She's never had that experience of knowing what it feels like to have what I would consider the greatest physical pleasure that someone can experience. Now, I'm sure that, she might have been with guys that have done things with her, maybe oral sex, things like that, things I might have mentioned earlier. Uh, I'm guessing that she has a pretty strong masturbation game and a strong sex toy game, but still, that doesn't equal the benefit of being with another person intimately and having someone hold the reins to those things in that way that connects you. So that made me feel bad because when it comes down to it, sex is good. Sex is really good. And the third reason that I felt bad and the reason that this whole thing resonated with me is because she was questioning the validity of the stance that she'd taken. Like, this is something that she's doing to get closer to God. She took this stance based on her faith, and now she was questioning that stance and questioning God. And even though when she said it in the interview, it seemed kind of lighthearted, like, God, why? But for those of us that are familiar with the Bible in any way, and I'm imagining that it's the same way in other doctrines, we're not to question things. We're not to ask why. And so that's the thing. And another thing that was interesting to me that kind of sucks is that, you know, religion, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, doctrine, all doctrines teach us that there is not a direct correlation between doing good. And sorry for looking down. I just keep looking down because I'm trying to make points as if there are notes here, but there aren't. But anyway, but people think that there's a direct correlation between doing good and having a worldly benefit. So, and part of the reason that people believe that is because in a lot of cases, in this case Christianity, again, because that's what she believes, we see all of these scripture verses, these Bible verses that talk about how, if you do this for me, I'll open up a window and make a flood, and you'll get all of these things and all of this money, all of this wealth, and all of this stuff. And while that sounds good, and I'm not saying that that's not true, but there's no one-to-one connection, whereas like, if you don't have sex, then that means I'm going to do all of these God is going to do all of these great things for you. If you give back, God is going to do all of these great things for you. Now, when I say that as it applies to things on this earth. Now, I do believe strongly that you will benefit greatly in heaven once you pass, but I don't think that there are any guarantees that by doing X, you'll get the benefit of Y on this earth. And so it sucks because in some cases, if you do this thing, that means that you are going to live on this earth for 38 years, if not longer, without experiencing this pleasure. And so, yeah, that kind of sucks. I feel bad for her. And, and again, that to me isn't speaking poorly of Christianity. I never want to do that. But, it just sucks that, you can be the most decent person and still get crapped on. As a matter of fact, it seems like the people that do the worst on this earth seem to come out the best. It's like that whole thing where the good guy always finishes last. I wouldn't say that that's the case, but it seems like if we're just comparing earthly pursuits and earthly benefits, it seems like those people who aren't the nicest people oftentimes, way too often, come on top. And those people that make sacrifices and try to do things to become better people, they don't they don't often enough come out on top on this earth. But I believe that there's more to life than this earth, and that's why I'm encouraged. And not to say that I'm a virgin or anything like that, or I'm trying to be a virgin, but it just gives me faith in humanity, knowing that There's something bigger than this. And when I do something for someone, I'm going to get mine. And I might not see it here. Oftentimes, I don't see it here. Hardly ever do you see it here, but it's there. So that's all that I wanted to say. Shout out to Lolo Jones. And Lolo Jones, if you're listening to this podcast, let's be real. Lolo Jones isn't listening to this podcast. But anyway, if she were listening to this podcast, I would tell her to be encouraged. And I will also say this, we're just assuming, well, I'm just assuming that because she's a virgin and she's taking this vow and she's honoring this vow, that she's a decent person. But she might strangle cats. I don't know that woman. I don't know her life. I don't know the other things that she could be doing that's good or bad. And one thing I found out in my years walking this earth, boy, nobody's 100% anything. There are some people that I know that have been incredibly nice to me, who I don't want to call them evil, but boy, they are something to deal with. But I can speak about my personal experience with them and say, well, shoot, they were cool with me. And I've had the reverse happen too, where people have come across as being the nicest people in the world, but then you get to know them and it's like, wow, I am scared to be alone with you. It's like some of your views are just, whew, I can only imagine what you've done in real life. But, they give a lot to charity. So they're a good person. I don't know how any of this works. Got to sort it all out. Shout out to Lolo Jones and shout out to everybody out there that's just trying to be a better person in this world. This is the Dating While Adulting podcast. I am done with this today. I'll be back. What's the day? Thursday? Yeah, today is Thursday. So I'll be back Monday or Tuesday. You know how it goes. The scary schedule is either Monday or Tuesday or Thursday and Friday. Thursday or Friday. So Monday or Tuesday, and Thursday or Friday. I'm going to get this right. Monday or Tuesday and Thursday or Friday, twice a week. That's it. Email me at michael@datingwhileadulting.com. Thank you. Bye.